Hi, this is the One Point Podcast, and I'm Rohit Yadav. Last year, September, we published a unique report called Diverse by Default, in which we explored the what, the why, and the how of the topic. We all know the what: lower funding to diverse founders, founders experiencing challenges in fundraising. We also understand the why: diverse teams make better decisions and also better investments that leads to innovation and better business outcomes. But we needed to build and implement the how. So in last year's report, we surveyed 40 plus ecosystem people, investors, founders, and operators to find a pragmatic approach, tangible methods, and productive frameworks. Now, 1 year later, I'm interviewing VCs who have topics like diversity, overlooked founders, underrepresented founders, and immigrant founders embedded in their investment thesis, and explore together what has changed in the ecosystem. And to discuss all this today, on today's episode of the One Point Podcast, we have a perfect guest, Ihar. Ihar, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Rocky. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, before we start exploring the topic, let me introduce Ihar to you all. So, Ihar is a software engineer by training, and he developed AI products for Google, Facebook, and different startups. He has invested in 200 plus companies, including early checks in Instacart and PandaDoc. He has started Geek Ventures 3 years ago to invest in immigrant founders at early stage. He's originally from Belarus, so he's a perfect example of his investment thesis on how immigrants can add massive value to the startup ecosystems. Ihar, as a first question, please introduce Geek Ventures to the audience. What was your motivation to start Geek Ventures and your overall experience of running Geek Ventures for last 3 plus years?
Thank you very much, Rohit. It's a really nice introduction and glad to be here. I started Geek Ventures 3 years ago after a career of in software engineering and engineering leadership, as well as 10 years of angel investing. And the, the main angle that I've seen that I wanted to spend more of my time and ability on investing, and I wanted to elevate this to be a full-time job, and I wanted to make sure that I can support founders better. As an angel investor, it's always very limited with how much money you have, how much time you have in addition to your full-time job, and also how much value you can bring with all of this being so limited. With Geek Ventures, I'm able to invest in about between 10 and 15 companies every year, much larger checks because of the size of the fund, and also spend all of my time on actually supporting these founders in their journey. And when I was starting Geek Ventures, I was thinking like, what subgroup of founders or what sector I should be focusing on. And there are so many VCs out there, right? So what can I do to make a difference and to make a positive impact? And what I found is that me being an immigrant myself, I'm now 11 years in the US. Back then, it was 8 years in the US when I started Geek Ventures. And vast majority of the companies I invested were founded by immigrant founders. And they've all shown this, the founders I invested in, this amazing capabilities and traits of being extremely goal oriented, ambitious, being able to work a lot and really think out of the box about the goal and the problem they're solving. They were all cost conscious and being often from a more difficult background and going through difficulties in the migration journey themselves. And I thought that this is also an area where I could help, right? So because as I was moving to the US and I didn't know anybody, I needed to rely on people that I met to help me to learn where to go, who to meet, and how to be effective myself. And after building so many connections and embedding myself in this venture ecosystem in the US, I want to help the founders do the same. And when founders are moving to the US, the founders that are brilliant, that know how to build their solution, that know in and outs of their own sector where they're solving a really significant pain, they often don't know the right check writers or VCs or like ecosystem players in the US,
True.
and I could be there to help introduce them to them. And it blew up. It really ended up being the amazing thing, both from fundraising perspective and from founders perspective, right? So LPs loved our mission, our topic. LPs wanted to invest in us supporting immigrant founders, and the immigrant founders themselves preferred our investment over a lot of investments from other funds because they saw how we help them and how we help the ecosystem as well.
You beautifully explained how immigration as a topic became rational for your investment thesis. And it makes so much sense for the US ecosystem, right? Because a
Yeah.
lot of founders have proven their worth, and many of them have been immigrants, right? So the thesis kind of fit perfectly what was required. And there was a huge gap for sure. So, how do you see the last 3 years coming along for Geek Ventures? Tell us about some of your investments and how they have gone, and how are you able to find the new investments from the ecosystem?
So the most important is that we have grown as a firm, right? So I started it
Mhm.
by myself. I was just the lone person coming up with a name, with the logo, right? So and with a thesis, and talking to founders, talking to LPs. And as the time went, I was able to get other people to join me. And now we are a team of five. Actually, we'll be a team of six very soon. And
Wow.
we have developed a lot of processes. We have increased our capabilities. Now we are looking at more than 3,000 startups a year, which is obviously way more than
Wow.
I was able to look at when I was a angel investor, when I just started Geek Ventures. Are very disciplined about our pace. We are trying to invest in one, at most two startups a month, and we are doing it. We are very active now, regardless of the of what market thinks when is the right time to invest or not. We think that now is a great time to invest. We invested in a company in September. Overall, we invested in three companies in Q3. We also added several follow-on investments to our existing companies in Q3, and we see that quality of founders we are able to find and invest just goes up significantly. Of course, it also means there are more and more founders that we talk to and we don't invest because we
Mhm.
just increase number of companies we speak with. But hopefully, we are able to help somewhat in, of course, minor way to those founders that we don't even invest with by providing some feedback, by also providing some resources via events, content, and so on. But you asked for some examples of companies, right? Great. I can talk through a couple companies that we invested early on and a couple companies that we invested later on. Like, for example, one of the companies we invested in January 2022 initially called New Homes Mate. It's a company headquartered in Texas with founders from Ukraine originally. And when we invested, it was a very small team of just several people, and they have been building a solution to help people in the US buy houses directly from the builders, solving the housing
Okay.
crisis. And they just were going through early sales back then, but I've seen the potential of the team and the potential of their early hires. So we invested. And since then, their revenue grew significantly, more than 30x. And they have raised more
Wow.
money. And we were able to help them by introducing them to the ecosystem, but they were able to help us by being one of the best performers in our portfolio. For example, another company that we really believed very early on that's doing well is ShapesXR. We invested in December 2021, the first check. Since then, they raised more money, and more importantly, they have built the solution for 3D collaborative design that became
Mhm.
a standard in the industry. Back then, December 2021, they just launched the product, and very few, like thousands of people knew about it.
Mhm.
Now, pretty much any designer that designs 3D knows about their product. This is like the best
Wow.
collaborative solution on the market, and they are able to sell to really big Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies. We are able to invest in really amazing companies this year. So, for example, we invested in this company Wokello, which is a AI for financial analysts, and we just invested in them in July 2024. We have
Mhm.
been following them since last year. Immigrants from India in Seattle. And these guys have built a solution that is not only needed on the market, but it's also the best out of all solutions that address the same pain point. Is basically research, market research, a company research for VCs, PEs, and so on.
Mhm.
And we are using their product internally, and we have seen their ability to sell to big names and ability to really be the something that helps to increase the capabilities of anybody in financial industry. And that was an example of a company where we also recommended them to a lot of other VCs, and they were able to basically oversubscribe the round in part because of our introductions.
Amazing portfolio news. So, congratulations. Immigrants are doing so much for the ecosystem. It's tremendous. Let's zoom out for our second question. So, the topic of diversity and immigration has become much more complex in the US specifically in the last 1 year. Can you trace how this topic has evolved from a political perspective and a take a helicopter view of this entire topic?
So it's very interesting because when I was starting the fund in 2021, there was
Mhm.
much more focus in the US over 2020, 2021 on racial diversity, right? So, and me being white male, it was difficult to like tap into that and be the right person for that. Also, because my network is more immigrant and European because I'm from Eastern Europe. There was definitely an interest and demand for all sorts of improvement in access for overlooked people, right? So, and the phrase that I really feel dear is that talent is distributed evenly and opportunity is not. And what I
Mhm.
found is from in the area that I'm in is venture investments, opportunity means money, investor money. They're all so concentrated in the US and Silicon Valley. And talent, meaning entrepreneurs, meaning like founders, meaning high level technical talent, is all over the world, right? So how can we help connect them better? What I see is that in the US there is a lot of polarization, I would say, right? First of all, there were a couple years when DEI, as like diversity, equity, inclusion, became such an over-encompassing thing, and everybody was trying to do what they could in a big part for it. And then there was a pushback, and we see in the last year that a lot of companies are rolling back the DEI initiatives, and it becomes polarizing issue, and people start, to vote for the politicians according to the DEI as well, which I think that is sad. The supportive diversity should not be a political thing, right? It should be kind of
Mhm.
obvious thing. While also what is important is the not forgetting the merit, right? So a few people were saying that would demonize DEI by saying that it's kind of opposite of meritocracy, which I personally don't think is the case, right? I think
I too.
it's yeah, I think that meritocracy, meaning like selecting the people according to their merit, the ability, should not be opposite of diversity. I don't support like equity of outcomes. Of course, I think that people who are uh, able to do better work and better results should achieve better outcomes themselves, right? So, and this is also why we invest in not in all immigrant founders, we invest in the best immigrant founders, right? So, but what I see is that a lot of this is about the funnel, right? So, and meaning that how can we help more people be even considered? How can we get more people in the funnel for consideration and not be ignored? And this is where we help with immigrant founders, right? So a lot of immigrant founders have an issue that they don't know how to get on the radar of VCs, right? So and we want to make sure that they do get on the radar of those VCs because we introduce them, and in the end VCs, the other VCs who don't have diversity or immigrants or anything on their thesis, they still want the best teams, and it's my job and the founder's job is to present them their companies well. But the first thing is to actually get them in the room, get them on that call, get them introduced, and then the best of them will get the money from all VCs, right? So and
Mhm.
so I think this is definitely great. It became a little bit polarized thing, but I also see that over the last 3 years, regardless of the fact that diversity overall became more polarized politically, thing, there is a growth in both VC side and LP side for all sort of like interesting overlooked founders. I was just yesterday on a big GP LP event, and I met several LPs that are capital allocators that look for VCs to allocate money to that would specifically invest in overlooked founders. And these LPs are typically looking
Wow.
for VCs that do anything related to overlooked founders. For example, they are interested in VCs that invest in female founders. They're interested in VCs invest in racial minorities. They want VCs investing in veteran and so on, and immigrant founders and so on. And there is more of this kind of LPs, and I see on corporate side and as well as on personal family office side, I see more and more people uh, who became successful themselves, who want
Mhm.
to do good with their money. And there are two angles of doing good with their money. You can invest in topic, let's say climate. And there are a lot of
Mhm.
great climate VCs that fight climate change, that want to invest in solutions to decrease our global warming problems and the climate crisis. And there are LPs like family office who want to give money to those VCs. But the second angle is how can we increase the pool, right? So the overall capacity of the venture ecosystem, and that's where overlooked founders come in. And I see that there is more and more interest in that. Yeah.
Okay. You talked about very interesting topics, right? So, from your perspective, the demand and the need for venture capitalists within the overlooked founder space, diversity space will increase. So, that's kind of the
Mhm.
future that you are predicting. But end of the day, I think what you mentioned, diversity doesn't need to be the opposite of performance, right? The idea is to select the top class startups and get them funding, right? And they will do an excellent job, and eventually the entire ecosystem will evolve with them. So it's a very interesting and positive case that you're presenting
So,
for the
so
US
what I
ecosystem.
think is important is that there is still, while there is a growing slice, it's still a minority or like small minority of
Yes,
LPs
true.
that specifically look for this kind of VCs, right? So vast majority of LPs are looking for financial returns first and foremost. So whenever somebody creates a new firm or new VC firm and starts to raise for a new fund, they still need to lead with track record and with a reason why with a strategy why their VC can outperform the market and can really generate strong returns. But then what is important is that when you are talking with a lot of LPs and they talk with a lot of potential VCs to allocate money to, they
Mhm.
end up investing in the combination of what they believe is the VC that will generate returns, but also the VC that they can connect to on a personal level, on a values level, right? So, and some LPs would connect to a sector, right? So, as I say, maybe they will connect well to
True.
fintech or like climate tech and so on, but some will connect to the mission like ours, like invest in immigrant founders. So,
Makes
I think
sense.
for LPs, for VCs, they always need to mix both. But also, let's not forget for founders, right? So, founders, first and foremost, need to present a vision that will convince VCs that this will be a successful business. And that is the first and foremost. And I actually think that it's already, you don't even need to tell founders because none of the founders I spoke with would lead with, anything related to diversity or identity. They all talk about their business, which is exactly what they should talk about. But what I see is that they also love the fact that there exists a VC that understands their problems, right? So and also can support people like them.
Got it. So maybe one last question on the entire ecosystem and the future of such funds. How do you project things will go in the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years for diversity focused or immigrant focused or overlooked founder focused funds in general? So do you see them increasing in size? I mean, if we take the past as an example, and the funding and the amount of funding, and you mentioned it this way, is very small, but it hasn't changed quite a lot as compared to the overall 100% of what really is allocated to the venture
So I
capitalist.
think that it's really hard to speak in detail because there are several angles. First of all, the venture ecosystem is extremely opaque. And I applaud anybody who tries to build statistics on like what percentage of venture money goes to what kind of founders. I
Mhm.
personally find all the stats is dubious because it's almost impossible to find all the numbers for the whole ecosystem. Absolute majority of the deals are confidential, and you don't really know what's happening there. But in another angle is that vast majority of VC money is going to established large multi-billion or tens of billions firms. So there was another statistic, again, it's imprecise, it's all the VC statistics, that about 90-95% of LP money in the last year went to a few dozen firms, while the other 5% went to thousands of emergent firms, right?
Okay.
And the thing is that it is flight to safety because of the excesses of 2020, 2021. So there is this interesting thing that 2019, 2020, 2021 created a Cambrian implosion of new kind of explosion of new GPs, of new firms. So the number of firms that are being created by new emerging managers increased significantly. And that was a time, 2020, 2021, when LPs were supporting a lot of these firms, right? Because it was a peak of returns. It was easier. And then there was like complete reversal in 2022, 2023, 2024 became years where LPs started with just reducing all of their VC exposure, but then coming back to VC by first investing in firms that existed for 10, 20 years. And the firms that LPs prefer, like 90% of LP money, are the firms that are more generalist, that do not talk about overlooked founders at all. And these are great firms with great returns, and they should keep doing what they're doing. But one thing that I hope will happen over the next several years is that the percentage of LP money that goes to emerging managers will increase. And that's where we see all sorts of new models, including models for investing in overlooked founders.
Fingers crossed. We really hope that happens. So, for this next section, let's zoom in. Let's focus on the biggest challenges faced by diverse or immigrant founders. And if you can mention some founder stories over here to cite the challenges, feel free to do so. So, what are the top 2 or 3 challenges that you think, except from the fundraising? I mean, we all know that fundraising is always challenging, right? But apart from that.
So obviously, one of the challenges that so we invest both in recent immigrants and established immigrants that have come here like 10, 20 years ago. But specifically, recent immigrants often face challenges related to immigration journey, right? So, for example,
Okay.
they might be coming here on a visa and trying to deal with like moving to a green card. They might be dealing with their loved ones or family ones moving to the US, and that all takes away attention from their business. And we all know that US immigrant legal framework is extremely complicated, which is where a meritocratic legal framework would have helped a lot. But right now, it's really hard for even the most brilliant minds to come in and establish themselves. So that's a big part. Of course, similarly, when the co-founders' journey is also could be difficult. Besides that is being, the culture adaptation is a big thing. I myself am from Eastern Europe, where the culture is very different from US in one way. Like, for example, in Eastern Europe, we are much more direct. It's harder for people from Eastern Europe to understand like indirect feedback or sugar-coated feedback. But I know that people from Japan have like kind of opposite problems. So, or people from India have different kind of cultural adaptation problems with the US, right? So, and what means that with this cultural adaptation problems is that people who could be really brilliant founders who know a lot about the product, about their sector, they might have troubles of in sales, like for example, and I've seen it like attributing very high likelihood to contract closing just because of how they perceived the counterpart, the buyer, communicating with them, while in reality the likelihood of that contract closing is very low because the buyer was just extremely polite. Like this kind of stuff is really happening, and we are trying to help with the founders learning that. Of course, on the fundraising side, the same thing happening is learning how to navigate this journey of selling yourself. Like one of the angles where US founders have definitely benefit because of US ecosystem is the confidence in talking about themselves, right? So, and I think US is probably country number 1 in the world in building confidence from the young age. Wherever people come from, be it from Belarus or India or Japan or Indonesia or Australia, when these founders come in and try to talk about themselves to US VCs, they often sound less confident or, less accomplished than they actually should sound, right? So this is another interesting thing. But that's all about in this cultural adaptation bucket. And then there is also this like kind of social bucket where is like when people are new in the town, in the country, and it often becomes just work for them because there is not enough work-life balance because they don't have people to hang out with after work. So that's also sometimes a challenge, and we are trying to be very careful to see that the founders are not burned out. So we love the founders that can work really really hard every day of the week, but we want to make sure they don't burn out and they are
True.
pacing themselves because it's a long journey.
So if you divide those challenges into a couple of buckets, so one is the structural. So immigration policy is more of a structural topic, which probably we both at this level might not be able to influence quite a lot. So let's leave that aside for a moment and focus on the couple of other challenges that you mentioned. The culture is more about awareness, right? And the last topic is societal kind of values and being integrated into society itself. So it's more of an integration topic. What are the couple of low hanging fruit solutions that you think will be able to solve for these kind of awareness challenges, informational challenges, and social challenges in your aspect?
The clearest low hanging fruit is that by uniting these amazing top class founders in our portfolio, we are connecting them to each other where they can basically uh, talk to each other about the same problems that they face, and just basically bringing them together in online or offline format
Okay.
where they feel that the other people in the room have the same kinds of problems is really really helpful. So and this is where a lot of other funds also excel. Like for example, I know several friends of mine, VCs, are that support like female founders. They say the same thing. When their female founders are in the same room, they can talk about problems that they face, right, from perspective, right? So and this is the biggest, like lowest low hanging fruit that really helps. Of course, we also organize larger events, which helps also with social angle, right? So when we organize large events, I mean bring in people who are outside of our portfolio but who are interested in connecting with our
Okay.
portfolio, other founders and so on, which helps the people to connect with the people outside of their own bubble and so on. And this is where, for example, one angle that we like is connecting different immigrant groups, or let's say expat communities together, right? So because it's very common when somebody is coming to the US or to New York, especially, which has so many people from all the countries in the world, they connect with their own compatriots. So, like French people hang out with French people, right? So, like Indian people hang out with Indian people, Belarusians hang out with Belarusians. And when we connect different immigrants from different communities together, they end up like cross pollinate and open up even more of the eyes. And but also bring in people who are less exposed to the immigrant problems to the same communities. I mean, American founders, American VCs also helps to just improve overall awareness in the community.
Okay. So one blanket solution for the founders, one theme to really look at and focus on is just network, network, and network, right? Whether if you're about to start a company, if you're -1 to 0 journey or 0 to 1 journey, doesn't matter. I think the first and foremost is connect with people, reach out to people, talk
And
to people,
ask questions, ask
ask.
for
Yeah.
help. Yeah.
Yeah. And be part of as many networking events you can be, because you get those different perspectives, you get those new contacts through which probably you get your new advisor on your advisory board for your startup. So this can happen when the founders push themselves out of the box that they are in and go out and connect more. So
Yeah, and the people who are especially recent implants, people who moved recently, they have to network more because they start from lower base. So right, and they might have. It's a very interesting trade-off because, of course, in order to build a successful company, you need to sit on your desk a lot or talk to your team a lot. You need to send emails. You need to develop a vision. You need to work code your product. There are a lot of other tasks you need to do besides networking. But because you start with this disadvantage on the network compared to people who were building their network since they were in middle school, right? So you have to find time and opportunity to go out and network as well. But by the way, find ways to network efficiently. One of the things that I think
true.
that a lot of founders don't do well is that they treat networking as more like as a party. They go out, they talk to a lot of people, and then they go home and work. I think that it's extremely important after any event that you go to is to follow up with at least 5, better 10 people, and try to find at least 1 or 2 people every event that you will try to establish a deeper connection with. Meaning, like, That would be the person that you would want to meet every month, every couple weeks, invite to your events or like, your, and as opposed to just go to this like 100 people event as a party and then leave and go to work and like it never happened.
Excellent piece of advice. Yeah. Excellent. I want to ask a difficult question now. How would you rationalize many diverse founders or immigrant founders saying that we care about capital, we care about
Yeah.
fundraising, but not where it's coming from? Whether it's coming from a diversity focused VC or not, for them it doesn't matter. So how would you rationalize this situation?
This is perfect, by the way. It's like I totally agree with them. I think that, and we are always fighting to be included on the cap table on our merits, and I think every VC should be. Right. So, and I would never, fault any founder for taking like Sequoia's money over ours, right, or things like that, right? So it's important to be merit based, both from perspective of which founders we support, but also which VCs the founders take money from. And founders can be in different state of fundraising, right? So sometimes founder in the state where they need to take money from any VC, because if they don't take this money, they might run out of money. So, and from that perspective, it's like, it doesn't matter where it's coming from, as long as it is not a non-ethical money, right? So I still would say, like, check for red flags from VCs. But as long as there are no ethical problems, take the money regardless, diversity, non-diversity, sector specific, generalist, right? So value add, no value add. If you need the money and somebody is offering, take the money, right? So, but there is also an opposite situation, which there's a good problem to have. Minority of founders have, is that when they raise a round and suddenly it's oversubscribed and they need to think of which funds to reject.
Okay.
And in that case, look at the value add. Look at the value add first and foremost. Don't think about identity. And sometimes maybe there is a fund that's like so good in connecting you to your customers, because they know, like, if you are a healthcare company selling to hospitals and there is a fund that knows every hospital CIO, take money from that fund, of course. Right. So, and after all, think about the future of your company as a first and foremost. And that's very rational.
What you're saying, that the fundraising should be based on its own merits. It should stand on its own legs and should rather not be focused on some words. And the founders should actually check for themselves, what
Yeah.
from whom they are taking money. If there are no red flags, maybe taking money from a non-diversity focused VC would also be fine. It should be based on what value add other
Yeah.
VCs bringing on.
Check pros and cons. One thing that I always recommend founders, do the reference checks. So if you are selecting, if you have to choose between several VCs and take one and like reject others, talk to the founders that they invested in, and maybe if you have time, go to one of the events where the multiple founders they invested in, and
Okay.
ask what those founders think about them.
Thanks a lot. We are almost at the close of this recording. One piece of advice, I know you gave a lot of advice to the founders, but maybe one more that you would like to give it to the founders.
One thing is, always be thoughtful about the future and about learning, right? So I think the best founders that I've seen are the founders that don't think they know everything, that understand their carefully laid out plan might break, and they understand that anyone might be telling something helpful. So please listen, please adapt to what's going around you, and also de-risk yourself, meaning like keep enough money in the bank, raise money because you might hit a problem next month or next year that you didn't think about, and hire people who are smarter than you, or at least try, right? If you're extremely smart, it might be hard, but try. Always don't be the smartest person in the room. Try to hire people smarter than you, and that will get you to success.
Excellent piece of advice. Last but not the least, on the personal side, if I may ask, any interesting or inspirational thing or idea that you read or heard recently that you would like to share with the audience, irrespective of whether it's from venture or not, it doesn't matter, but anything outside venture is also fine.
Staying in venture, the one really strong idea I'm thinking a lot about is how important or helpful early angel investors could be for your company. And specifically, angel investors who have invested in companies before and who have a lot of connections and help. And what I've keep seeing again and again is that angel investors on average are more helpful to companies than venture funds. And if early on you can find extremely helpful angel investors, especially those that have invested in companies before and
Mhm.
have strong networks, try to convince them to invest in your company. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ihar. Thanks for your time and this excellent podcast recording. Thanks to the audience for listening. Take care.
Thank you, Rohit, and thank you, the audience. And I really enjoyed this.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.